The clock had just struck midnight when Officer Daniel Kern stepped out onto the frost-cracked dirt road behind the old Miller farmhouse. His K-9 partner, Titan, was already pawing frantically at the earth near the gnarled oak at the edge of the property. Moonlight glinted off the blade of Daniel's flashlight, catching the desperate, urgent gleam in Titan's eyes. Something had been buried here, something the dog smelled long before Daniel could even sense it. And as Titan's paws tore into the soil, a cold, sinking dread began to crawl up Daniel's spine, an instinctive warning that what lay beneath would shatter everything he thought he knew. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to like and subscribe for more gripping tales that haunt long after the last page. The air was sharp with frost, biting through Daniel's jacket as he crouched beside Titan. The K-9's paws clawed at the earth like a man possessed, sending clods of frozen dirt flying into the thin winter air. Daniel's breath came in ragged clouds, his flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. The farmhouse behind him loomed like a hollowed skull, windows dark except for the faint shimmer of moonlight on cracked panes. For years, the place had been abandoned. Rumors whispered among the townsfolk of old tragedies and disappearances, but nothing had prepared him for this. Titan, stop. Daniel's voice was low, hesitant. The dog froze for a heartbeat, ears perked, eyes fixed on the ground. But then, with a sudden urgency, Titan dove back in, nose pressed against the dirt, teeth scraping bark and soil alike. Daniel swallowed hard. Something in Titan's behavior wasn't natural. It was fear and something else. Recognition. Daniel's partner had been with him for 5 years, a German shepherd trained to detect everything from drugs to explosives. Yet tonight, the dog's instinct was primal, almost human in its insistence. Daniel reached for the radio on his belt, but his hands shook too much to steady it. He thought back to the call earlier that evening. A neighbor, nervous and trembling, had reported strange lights near the edge of the woods. "They're digging or burying something," she'd said. Daniel hadn't taken it seriously, until now. He knelt lower, brushing frost from the disturbed soil. A glint caught his eye, metal. At first, he thought it was an old farm tool, discarded long ago. But as he dug carefully, the shape began to take on a more deliberate, human outline. A box, small, iron-bound, with rust eating through its edges. His stomach twisted. Titan growled low, a deep, warning rumble that reverberated through the silent night. Daniel froze, staring at the box. For a moment, he considered leaving it, calling it in to the forensics team in the morning. But something tethered him here. Something about this midnight scene felt personal, as if the earth itself had been holding its breath until now. He opened the box slowly, the hinges creaking in the still night. Inside lay a bundle wrapped in canvas, tied with coarse twine. The smell hit him first, damp, musty, but underneath, something metallic. Daniel's hand trembled as he pulled back the cloth. What he saw made him stagger backward, his knees nearly giving out. A child's toy, a doll, its eyes staring blankly up at him. But beneath it, a notebook, leather-bound, water-stained, its edges chewed as if gnawed by rodents. And the handwriting inside was unmistakable. His own. Daniel's mind reeled. He didn't remember writing this. He didn't remember owning this. But the first page held a date. 15 years ago. The summer he'd spent with his estranged sister before she disappeared. A scream tore from his throat, swallowed instantly by the night. Titan pressed close, leaning against his leg, offering a strange comfort. Daniel's flashlight wavered, catching the edge of a small, muddy shovel discarded nearby. This wasn't just an old box. It was a message, a trail, a trap left in the earth by someone who knew him intimately. Daniel staggered to his feet, his mind spinning with memories he had buried, truths he had denied. Someone had been watching. Someone had remembered. And whatever had been buried here, it was a key to secrets he had never intended to uncover. He heard a sound then, faint but deliberate, a footstep crunching in the frost behind him. He spun, shining his flashlight toward the tree-line. The shadows seemed to ripple, stretching into shapes that didn't belong. A figure emerged, tall, thin, and familiar. Daniel froze. Recognition hit him like a punch to the gut. "Mara," he whispered. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. There was a coldness there, A calculation. The girl who had vanished 15 years ago now stood before him, older, hardened, and unrecognizable. "You finally found it," she said softly, voice like glass cracking. "I've been waiting for you to remember." Daniel's chest tightened. Titan barked, low and warning, as Mara stepped closer, each footfall deliberate, echoing in the emptiness of the frozen field. The box lay between them, a bridge between past and present memory and nightmare. He realized then that the farm, the dig, Titan's insistence, it wasn't just coincidence. Someone had orchestrated all of this. Someone wanted him to face what he had tried so desperately to forget. Daniel's hand went to his holster, but he hesitated. Mara raised her hands in mock surrender, her eyes never leaving his. "I didn't come to hurt you," she said. "Not yet." And in that moment, beneath the gnarled oak and the indifferent stars, Daniel understood. Some truths were buried for a reason, but some truths had claws. The cold air gnawed at Daniel's face, but he barely noticed. His eyes were locked on Mara, the girl who had vanished 15 years ago and returned now like a ghost carved from vengeance. Titan growled low, shifting his weight, tail stiff as a broom handle. Every instinct Daniel had honed over a decade on the force screamed at him. Something here was deeply wrong. Mara crouched beside the box, lifting the soaked notebook with careful reverence. Her eyes, sharp and unflinching, scanned its pages as though the words themselves were a map, leading somewhere only she understood. "You've been running from this," she said, voice quiet but accusatory. "You think you buried it with your memories. But I never forgot." Daniel's throat tightened. He remembered that summer, fleeting glimpses of laughter and sunburned skin, the promise of a family that would never be whole. And the night she disappeared, the one he'd blocked out, pretending it was just another small-town tragedy. But here, now, she was real and she was angry. Why are you here?" Daniel finally managed, voice ragged. "Why dig this up now?" Mara's eyes flicked toward the old farmhouse, its silhouette looming against the frost-dimmed moonlight. "Because some debts don't die, and some lies, well, they have teeth." The words sent a shiver through him. Titan pressed against his leg, growling at Mara as if sensing something Daniel could not. Mara noticed the dog but ignored him, turning her gaze back to Daniel. "You don't remember, do you?" Daniel shook his head. "Remember what?" She smiled thinly, a curve of lips that didn't reach her eyes. "Your involvement. The night I disappeared. You left me there, alone, and I've been waiting, Daniel, waiting for you to face it." The frost underfoot seemed to harden, making the night feel heavier, pressing it on him from all sides. Daniel felt dizzy, the cold morphing into something else. Guilt, shame, fear all twisted together into a tight knot in his stomach. His hands trembled as he reached toward the notebook. The pages were damp, but the ink was legible. Drawings of the farmhouse, notes about hidden compartments, names, dates, threats scribbled in a child's careful hand that had matured into something precise, almost surgical. A sound made him freeze, a faint snapping of twigs from the woods. Daniel turned his flashlight toward the tree-line. Shadows moved, deliberate, slow, and calculated. He squinted. A figure emerged from the darkness, tall, muscular, face obscure beneath a hood. Titan barked and lunged, but Daniel caught the leash just in time. "Who's there?" Daniel demanded, voice sharp, commanding. But the figure remained silent, stepping closer with a calmness that unnerved him. Mara's eyes narrowed. "It's him," she whispered. "The one who helped bury everything." Daniel's heart thumped violently. Memories long suppressed clawed their way to the surface. The man he'd trusted during those chaotic months, the one who had promised to protect Mara and instead had been part of the betrayal. The hooded figure stepped into moonlight, revealing a scarred face and a crooked smile. Daniel's stomach turned. "Garrett," he said, voice barely audible. The man who had been his mentor, his friend, the person who had orchestrated Mara's disappearance. And now he stood before them, unafraid, almost proud. Garrett's gaze fell on the box. "You found it," he said simply, as though congratulating a child on a minor triumph. "Took you long enough." Mara's fists clenched. "You'll pay for this," she said, voice trembling with barely contained rage. Garrett chuckled, a low, hollow sound that seemed to swallow the night. Pay? No one pays for surviving Mara. Not really. You should know that by now. Daniel's mind raced. He was caught between the ghosts of his past, Mara's fury, and the dangerous presence of Garrett. The moral lines blurred. The man who had been a mentor, the girl who had been family, and a loyal dog that seemed to sense the truth before anyone else. A sudden movement in the darkness, a rustle of leaves, a faint metallic clink, made Daniel spin, gun drawn. Nothing, just shadows. And then, without warning, Titan barked, low and urgent, lunging toward a particular part of the woods. Daniel ran after him, heart hammering, and stumbled over a mound of frost-cracked earth. Titan was digging again, uncovering something buried deeper than the first box. Daniel knelt beside the dog, brushing away the soil with frantic hands. His stomach dropped. Another box, this one heavier, larger, wrapped in oilcloth, tied with rope so old it snapped under his grip. He opened it with trembling hands. The smell hit him first. Decay, rot, and the metallic tang of blood. Inside were items he recognized instantly. Mara's belongings from that summer. Clothing, personal effects, and a small locket. But there was something else, the photograph. Daniel froze. It was him, standing beside Garrett, laughing, unaware that a shadowed figure watched him from the edge of the frame. A cold, shuddering realization gripped him. He had been complicit, even if unknowingly. His past, buried like the earth beneath his hands, had clawed its way back to the surface. Mara stepped closer, her eyes hard. "Do you remember now?" she asked, voice cutting through the night like glass. "Do you see why I had to wait?" Daniel swallowed, nodding slowly. The betrayal, the guilt, the secrets, all coalesced into a heavy weight pressing against his chest. And in that moment, he knew the night was far from over. Garrett stepped forward, hand on his knife. "You think you can fix this?" he asked, voice eerily calm. "You've been digging your own grave, Daniel. Titan can't save you from what's coming." Daniel tightened his grip on the gun. Titan growled, back arched, teeth bared. Mara's expression softened slightly, not in mercy, but in understanding. "You have a choice," she said. "Face it, or keep running from the truth." The wind picked up, rustling the trees, carrying with it the scent of earth and decay. The night seemed to pulse, alive with secrets, lies, and the unspoken horrors that had been buried for years. Daniel's chest tightened. One wrong move, and it would all end here. And in the darkness, as Titan growled and Garrett smirked, Daniel realized something terrifying. Some truths, once unearthed, cannot be buried again. Chapter 2 deepens the suspense, introduces Garrett as a morally gray antagonist, and escalates the stakes for Daniel and Mara. The tension between past betrayals, buried secrets, and moral dilemmas grows, setting the stage for the climax in Chapter 3. When you're ready, I'll proceed with Chapter 3, the final chapter, with shocking reveals, betrayal, and emotional resolution. The frostbitten wind whipped across the clearing, rattling the branches of the gnarled oak under which Daniel and Mara stood. Titan growled low, every muscle tense, ears flattened. Garrett's knife caught the moonlight, a cruel silver sliver that made Daniel's stomach knot. Time seemed to stretch, each second pulsing with a weight that pressed down on his chest. "You think this ends here?" Garrett said, voice calm, almost clinical. "You don't understand the choices you made, the lives you affected." Daniel's mind spun, memories flashing like fractured mirrors, summer nights, Mara laughing by the creek, the argument he'd had with Garrett when he suspected something was wrong, the night she vanished. He had been complicit in a way he'd never admitted, trusting Garrett while blindly following orders that had left Mara vulnerable. And now, all of it lay bare, unearthed like the soil beneath Titan's paws. Mara's eyes glimmered in the moonlight. "You buried me, Daniel. And now, you buried yourself in lies. You need to see it." Daniel felt his chest tighten, guilt clawing at him. His voice broke. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." Garrett scoffed. "Denial won't save you. You were part of it from the start." He stepped closer, the knife reflecting the pale light, a harbinger of violence. "And now you'll pay." Titan barked, a feral, warning sound that reverberated through the clearing. The dog lunged, teeth bared, forcing Garrett to stumble back. But Daniel didn't have time to react. Mara stepped forward, hand steady, revealing a small revolver she had drawn from her coat. "Stop," she commanded. "It's over. Not because I forgive you, but because it's time for the truth to breathe." Garrett froze, eyes narrowing. "You'd betray me?" Mara's gaze didn't waver. "I'd say what's left of the person I used to be. And Daniel, he's part of that." Daniel swallowed, heart-hammering. He took a cautious step forward. "Garrett, it's over. Whatever twisted plan you had, it ends tonight." A tense silence fell over the field. The wind seemed to hold its breath, the shadows stretching longer, reaching for them like fingers. Titan growled again, his hackles raised, sensing danger before Daniel could even process it. Garrett's smirk faltered, frustration creeping into his composure. "You think you can undo 15 years of careful work." His voice was edged with desperation now. "You can't. None of you can." Mara shook her head, a subtle mixture of sorrow and determination. "We don't need to undo it," she said quietly. "We need to confront it, face it, and finally put it down." With that, Daniel and Mara acted in near-perfect unison. Daniel lunged, grabbing Garrett's arm and twisting it away from the knife. Titan leaped, knocking Garrett off balance, teeth snapping dangerously close. Mara fired a single shot into the air, a warning, and Garrett froze, realization dawning that he was outmaneuvered. The struggle was brief but brutal. Garrett fell to frozen ground, groaning, the knife skittering across the frost-crusted dirt. Daniel's hands shook as he pinned Garrett, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Mara stepped forward, taking the knife and tossing it into the nearby woods, as if severing the hold Garrett had over their past. Panting, Daniel sank to his knees, Titan pressing close, his warm body a tether to the present. Mara knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We survived," she whispered, but there was no celebration in her tone, just a quiet relief that comes from facing a long-buried truth. Daniel picked up the notebook and the small boxes, holding them carefully. Each item was a shard of memory, a fragment of guilt, and a testament to lives disrupted. "We buried again?" he asked, voice low, almost afraid to know the answer. Mara shook her head. "No, we preserve it, not as a secret, but as a warning, a record that cannot be ignored. Sometimes the past is to remain visible, so it doesn't claim any more lives." The night was still again, but the frost-bitten wind carried a different weight, a sense of release, fragile and tentative. Garrett remained pinned but alive, a defeated presence that no longer commanded fear. Daniel could see the storm in Mara's eyes, tempered now by resolve, and in Titan's loyal gaze he found a tether to hope. As dawn crept over the horizon, pale and tentative, the field felt almost peaceful. Daniel and Mara walked slowly toward the farmhouse, Titan padding close by, ears alert. The notebooks, boxes, and fragments of the past were carried not as burdens but as evidence of survival, of confrontation, and of enduring courage. Daniel paused at the edge of the tree line, looking back at the spot where Titan had first started digging. The earth was disturbed, scarred by secrets and revelations. He touched Titan's head, feeling the warmth of loyalty and instinct. "You knew," he murmured, voice heavy. "You always knew." Titan barked softly, nuzzling his hand, a simple acknowledgement that some truths were too deep for words. Daniel exhaled slowly, allowing the weight of guilt, fear, and memory to lift just enough for him to breathe. He looked at Mara, and for the first time in 15 years he saw not just a sister, but a survivor, a person shaped by pain, hardened by betrayal, yet unbroken. The farmhouse remained silent, still a relic of the past, but Daniel knew it would never again hold secrets. The night had unearthed the worst, and in doing so had begun the slow, quiet process of healing. As the first rays of sunlight touched the frost-crusted earth, Daniel whispered a vow to the memory of all that had been lost, and to the fragile hope of what could be reclaimed. Titan padded forward, Mara at his side, and together they walked into a new day, leaving the buried truths behind, but never forgetting their lessons. And somewhere deep in the woods, Garrett's defeated groans faded into silence, a reminder that some shadows, once confronted, could no longer control the light.